Okay, today's Java class will be on methods. So methods are a collection of code grouped together so that you can use that code at any time. And really it helps keep your code organized and prevents you from repeating code, and it's just good practice. So let's say you are coding a game. At the end of each level, you want to increase the player's money, increase their experience, and display a message. It would be very repetitive if you had to type all of these things every time the player leveled up. Now let's say you wanted to change the amount of money the player receives when they level. You'd have to go through your code and change every line where you give the player money. You could avoid all of this by creating a method so that you're reusing the same block of code, and when you edit that one block, it changes it for the whole program. So there are 5 important parts of a method. There's the modifier, the return type, the name of the method, the parameter list, and the code that's supposed to execute inside of the method. There are a lot of method modifiers like private, public, and protected, but for now we'll just be using public static. Public and static are 2 different modifiers, but we'll be using this combination for now. And don't worry about what it means. This is a more advanced concept. So just know that you want to use this. Next, you write the method's return type, which is a type of variable that's given back by the method when you use it. You'll understand this more later, especially when you practice it. And the return type can be any of the variable types like ints or doubles or strings and so on. Now we have the name of our method. And just like variable names, method names use camel case, meaning the first word is lowercase, and after that every word starts off capitalized. This is used to identify methods just like we use variable names to identify variables. So make sure your variable name is clear because you're going to need to use it. Just like variables, the name can be anything you want, but it should be organized and clear. So in this case, add 2 numbers, you can easily guess this is a method that'll add 2 numbers. The final part of the method declaration is the parameter list. And these are the variables that you give to the method so that they can be used inside the method. Remember we learned about variable scope last class. If we created a variable in your main method, you can't access it in a different method because the variable scope is in the main method. So if you did want to use that variable in your new method, you can pass that variable into the method as a parameter. You write the type of variable, followed by the name, and then you use a comma to separate the list. You can pass as many parameters as you want, including none. So here we have 2 parameters. They're both integers, and one of them is num1 and num2. We couldn't have the same name like num1 and num1 because then you have 2 variables, and once again, Java wouldn't know which one to use. Now we have the code inside the method, which is the code that we want to execute. The format is similar to the code inside like an if statement or a loop. You put the code inside curly braces and then you indent it. I mentioned return type earlier. In your code, you need to return a value identified by the keyword return. You'll see an example of how this works next. So now that we've created our method, we have to use it, or in programming terms, we have to call the method. First, we need to write the name of the method. Then, in parentheses, we give all the information needed for the method, which are the parameters. Not all methods need parameters, in which case you would just have empty parentheses. Finally, you put your semicolon, and now you've called your method. So this would be the method that we're trying to call. We have public static, which is our modifier. We have the int return type, and we're adding 2 numbers. So if we're adding 2 numbers, we need 2 integer parameters, and we're going to return num1 plus num2, which will just add the numbers. And so here we have x equals 10 and y equals 15, and we pass these two variables just by using x and y to add two numbers, and so this added the two numbers. So this is what the full code would look like. This is the class declaration. Don't worry about this. Then we have our main method declaration, and you'll start recognizing this now: public static void main. This is just a method. You need this in your Java program for it to execute, and it has to be by the name main, and it has to have this parameter list. And you might be wondering what this void is, because we didn't learn about a data type called void. Well, a method can also return nothing, and so void means nothing. So this method, you've never had to return inside the main method, right? Because you don't need to, since you specified that it doesn't return anything. And then, so once we open our method and then we close it, we can create a new method here, which is the add two numbers. Add two numbers, and then, so when it returns that integer, then the value needs to be stored somewhere. So we can store it in a new integer variable called sum, and then when we print it, we'll be printing whatever 10 plus 15 is, because this is just 10 plus 15, so the result will be 25. Now here's an example of a very basic method that just prints hello when it's called. There's no return value, so we don't have any return keyword, and there's no parameters, so we just have empty parentheses. This is a basic method with just one line of code, and as you can see, you don't need any parameters. So here's a review of the 5 components of a method, and we're going to be using the main method as an example. So we have our modifier, which is public static, and then we have void, which means no return type, and then we have the name of the method, which is main, and we have our parameter list, which is a string array, which we'll learn later, and the name of that variable, and then we have the code in the method, which is just printing out main method. So here are some exercises to practice. As always, you should try them out for yourself, and if you need any help, you can ask in our Discord server, which will be linked in the description. And that's all for today.